There we go. All right, so a half line is part of a line consisting of all the points on a given side of a given point on the line. So, well, let me finish writing that, and then I'll kind of show you guys what that means. Right, and so if it was half line AB, the notation for that is AB. It's an open circle. It has to be an open circle, and then just like an arrow this way. It will always point to the right. Always. Never to the left, always to the right. So let's say we have a line, okay, which has, I'm going to put C, A, and B on here. All right, so when we're talking about half line AB, we're talking about the point, it starts kind of right after A and goes over here, right? So it starts at A, but it does not include point A, okay? That's why it's an open circle, right? So it starts at point A, but does not include point A and goes in the direction of B. Then it becomes a ray. That's the next thing we're going to talk about.
You need to add the A?
Yeah. Yeah, so a ray will include that point, but a half line does not. It just tells you kind of where it starts. Right? So like, for example, let's say we wanted to talk about half line, or like, so let's say I have this one. I've got the open circle at A, but I go over here. To write that, that's going to be half line A, C. You always want to start at this endpoint, or like wherever your open circle is. That's going to be your first letter. So on these, it does matter the order that you write your letters in. So you always have to start with what your endpoint is. So in this case, it's A. And then your second one tells you what direction it's pointing. So it's pointing in the direction of C. So it's AC, again, open circle to the right. I don't care that it's pointing to the left. You always draw it to the right with your notation. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so again, half lines don't include your starting point. Okay, anybody still writing?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right, I see people writing, but I don't know if that, all right, are we good? All right, so then let's talk about rays. Right, we kind of started to a little bit. But a ray is, they call it the union of a half line and its origin. So basically, it's a half line that includes that origin point. Right, so again, the notation for ray would just be like AB, and it's just like a single arrow pointing one way. You don't have to put like a filled in dot or anything. So it's part of a line that includes the endpoint. So like to draw ray AB, you would have your endpoint is A. So whatever letter is here with the non-arrow side, that's always going to be your endpoint. And then you can draw your ray, so just draw that part. And then B is always going to be the part with the arrow. So, for example, if I asked you to name this ray, what would it be? Like, what would the name of that ray be? XY, right? So X, Y, arrow, again, always pointing to the right. So even if my ray looks like this, so what about this one? What would the name of the yellow one be? YX. And again, when I write my notation, I start with my endpoint at Y because that's where my endpoint of my ray is, and then go towards X. Right, so the notation is also helpful in knowing how to draw it yourself. You know that if you were given this to draw it, you would know that like Y is your endpoint, X is your other point.
So could it ever be called like
on the blue one, could it ever be called a y-x ray?
No. Yeah, so for rays and half lines, you can't switch the order. Okay, so the next part I want to talk about is the word between. I know that sounds like fairly common sense, but it gets a little bit more specific in math. So, in order for something to be like between 2 points, it has to be on one line, right? So there's not so much a definition for this one as an example. So let's say we have this line here. A, B, C. Right. So on this picture I drew, we can say that B is between A and C. Again, because they are collinear, they have to be on the same line. Okay? And to write, like, you'll see this in your book some. Like, so if you see something that's like this, A hyphen B hyphen C, that's our notation for between. That tells you that B is between A and C, and all three of those points are on the same line. Right? So, like, typically you think between it's just like, oh, somewhere in the middle, right? But say we have X, Y up here, Z. Y would not be between X and Z because it's not on the same line. All right, so for stuff to be between, it has to be collinear. All right, does that make sense? Okay. All right, are we good with that slide? Okay. Next is opposite rays. So it's basically two rays are opposite one another if they form a line. Right, so again, opposite rays would have to, again, form a straight line. So, like, I have these two. If they were drawn like this, though, like, so these would be considered opposite rays. This would not be, right? Because, again, they have to form a straight line. All right, everybody get that? Almost? Okay, just a couple more, and then we're good. Okay, so our next one is segment. So a segment is 2 points and all of the points in between them. So this is also technically line. The book has it as segment, but segment and line segment are the same thing. All right, so segments have 2 endpoints, right? So no arrows, no extending infinitely. So like A and B in that portion of the line in between there. Right, to write line segment, it's just AB with the line over it. Oh, that looks like an arrow. It should just be. right? You could also call it BA. Segments, the letters don't matter again because it's endpoints on both sides. Right, and then even if I were to like throw another point on here, so like C, right, then we could have segment AC is this part, right? And then CB is between C and B. Oh, still writing with a highlighter. Right, so on. So you could, and again, or BC and CB would be the same thing. CA, AC, same thing. So just like with lines, segments, you can swap the letters. Okay, how we feel about line segments? That one I think should be fairly familiar to you guys, right? Okay. All right, so then next we have an angle.
Are you skipping the half plane?
Yep.
Opposite planes?
Yeah. Yes. Because honestly, they never get used again. Like we never talk about them again. And I just feel like it causes a lot of stress for people because they're kind of complicated and we don't need it. So, yep. All right, so we're moving on to angle. So it is the union of two distinct rays. So like combining two rays together with a common endpoint. So two rays with... Right, so again, let's say we have x, y, and we also have x, z. All right, so we're going to kind of knock out all these. So their common endpoint is called the vertex. Right, so that's the common endpoint of an angle. Right, and then the two rays that like make that up are called the sides. Right, so those are the... All right, so it's just easier to like draw all that with one picture. So, all right, so again, vertex is the common endpoint. So where the two rays come together, right? The sides are just the two separate rays. So like XY is one side of an angle, XZ is the other side. All right, when naming an angle, so you have different ways you can do it, right? So the symbol for angle is just this little angly looking thing, right? And then, so you can do like Y, X, Z. So the vertex always has to be the middle letter, right? So like we can't call this angle XYZ. You have to have X in the middle, right? So we could do YXZ, right? But you can switch the Z and Y. So like what else could we call this? Yep, we could do ZXY. And as long as there's not any other angles attached to this, if it's just like one standalone angle, you could also just call it angle X. You can name it with just the vertex. But like sometimes we have a lot of angles going on with one picture that'll share that vertex of X. In that case, you can't just say angle X because there could be a lot of ones you're talking about. But if it's just a standalone angle like this, you can just call it angle X. All right, so you need to make sure you know the three ways that you can name those angles. Okay, questions about angles? I'm going to take that as a no. Okay, then the last part about angles I think is fairly straightforward. So we have interior of an angle, which is just the space inside the angle. So like this is the interior. Anybody have any guesses on what the exterior is?
The outside.
The outside, right? So it's just this part. Right, so that's our exterior.
I'm just gonna remember that. I'm not gonna write it down.
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, so interior is inside the angle, exterior is outside. So like we could say, like if say there was a point A, like we could say A is on the interior of the angle, B out here is on the exterior. As long as you know inside, outside. So any questions? You guys feel pretty good about this one today? You guys seem more calm today. Maybe.
Man, my stomach is like having a party. Oh my gosh. It's so loud.
All right, so let me move this. All right, so page 21, we're going to do 1 through 12. And then Karis's favorite, 32, 36 with some always, sometimes, never.